Chris Paul has completely resurrected his game this year with the Oklahoma City Thunder. This is a guy that was practically thrown away by the Rockets.
Nobody
because they wanted
him. Right.
because they wanted to bring in Russell Westbrook. If you look at their numbers, if you look at the Rockets' numbers with Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook, they were better with Chris Paul than they were with what they are with Russell Westbrook.
Now, what are you judging in terms of the team value, in terms of other players around him?
First of all, Chris Paul has been, even though he's been an injured playoff player, he's a better playoff player than Russell Westbrook. He is. Chris Paul is also a better leader, and he doesn't demand the ball as much as Russell Westbrook does.
Right. He's one of the last lines of those original pure point guards.
Now, when you look at Chris Paul and what he has done with the Thunder this year, it's been absolutely remarkable. Chris Paul is averaging, 17 points a game?
He's averaging 17.5 points a game, 6.7 assists, and 4.9 rebounds, 1.5 steals.
And a shutdown defender at his position. Mm-hmm. This is a guy that's 35 years old. He's going to probably be traded sometime in the offseason. He's going to have 41 million reasons why next year he wants to go to a winning team and win a title. This is a guy that's never won a title, and he's never played in an NBA Finals game.
And barely played in the conference finals either when the Rockets didn't make it because he got hurt, I think.
Can't stay healthy.
Yeah, I think game 4 or something he got hurt in.
But to me, when you look at Chris Paul, you don't look at the glamour. You don't look at his State Farm commercials. You don't look at any of that. You look at Chris Paul at what he has done with a team that was not even supposed to make the playoffs this year.
Not even that. They were supposed to be second to last or last in the Western Conference to most people.
And now when you look at them, they are what? The 6th seed or the 5th seed?
I think they're the 6th seed right now, and they're, I think, 8 games over 500.
Which is incredible. Look at their roster. If you look at their starting lineup right now, Speedy, bring up their roster right now.
Let's see.
What's their roster right now?
All right, they're 30. Oh, they're even better. 38 and 24. They're right now the 6th seed in the West by half a game over Dallas.
And what is their roster? I know Chris Paul being their starter. I know a couple of players. I don't know.
Dennis Schroeder, I know, is their other
Schroeder is the other guard. Yes. Schroeder's had a good season too.
Yeah.
Steven
Adams is still there.
Steven Adams, yeah.
And
you don't know the roster by heart, Speedy, Mr. I Know Everything.
Well, they traded a lot of it, so let's see.
Steven Adams, Baisley, Burton.
Andre Roberson's still there? I thought he was gone, too.
Roberson,
Nerlens
Ferguson.
Noel, who...
Danilo Gallinari, who I...
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I forgot
he's an old man now. I remember when he was drafted by the Knicks at number 4th pick.
Mm-hmm, right.
I forget what year was that. I think it was 2007, 2008, somewhere around there.
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who was one of the pieces they got back for the Clippers for Paul George. I think Hamidou Diallo was another one they did too. And I think the rest are all young players that I don't...
Nobody even knows half the players on this team.
A lot of them, I think, are first or second round picks.
I mean, the roster is Chris Paul.
Right.
That's what it is. Chris Paul makes everybody around him better. And that's why I want to get into the whole New York Knicks situation. Right now, they have a new GM, or I'm sorry, not a new GM, a new president running the organization in Rose, who has been a player's agent for practically his whole career. I think he's been an agent for 20 years. He's been the agent for LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Chris Paul, Carmelo Anthony, all the big superstar names. Right now, Karl Anthony Towns, well, and he's no longer Karl Anthony Towns' agent, but he was Karl Anthony Towns' agent. Karl Anthony Towns, rumors coming out, it's the Timberwolves in Minnesota. He wants out of Minnesota. Now, when you look at Chris Paul, you look at his leadership skills, is he worth $41 million for the Knicks to make a trade in the offseason to bring Chris Paul in to help develop Frank Ntilikina or Dennis Smith Jr. or one of these young point guards, or maybe a young point guard that they're going to draft in this year's draft? Mm-hmm. Is it worth paying a guy $41 million to help develop players? Or even help you get into the playoffs? With this roster, this if you put Chris Paul on this Knicks roster, this is a better Knicks roster than it is of
Thunder.
Thunder.
I That's reasonable, especially with the young talent. Most of the Thunder young talent were late round picks, whereas the Knicks have a lot of first round picks on this team still.
So if you add Chris Paul to this roster, are they a top 4 seed? Are they a top 5 seed?
Probably not, but they could be a playoff team, I think.
Probably not. Why? I mean, they're in the Western Conference right now with Chris Paul, the Thunder, and they're a 6 seed in the Western Conference, and the Knicks have more talent. And the Western Conference is so much better than the East. So how could you say Chris Paul, what he's doing right now with the Thunder, making them a 6 seed, how could you say that Chris Paul could make the Knicks a 4th seed or a 3rd seed?
It also depends on what they would trade to in the process, because they're probably going to have to give up some young players in order to get Chris Paul as well. I don't think it'll be
Would you make the trade for Chris Paul?
I don't know if it'll be that much.
Would you make a trade
Depends
for Chris
on what
Paul?
the value is.
$41 million? Would you pay Chris Paul $41 million?
I wouldn't care about the money, because I don't think the Knicks are in a position to be able to spend that money anyway. And
they are in position to spend whatever money they want.
Right, but knowing the Knicks, they'll end up messing it up and spending it on a second-tier guy is what I'm saying. So at least if you're going to get a guy, I'd rather have Chris Paul, an established point guard, a guy who is a good leader, like you're saying, and a very good mentor, I think, to some of these young players on the Thunder. So I'm not worried about the money end of it. I'm curious, because he's had this resurrection-type year, if that'll up his value a lot more, where they have to trade multiple young pieces that maybe they can't afford to. I'm not worried about the money. I'm more worried about the capital.
I'm worried about the New York Knicks, and the Knicks making the right choice and not the wrong choice. Now, there are rumors coming out that the Knicks might be interested in bringing back Carmelo Anthony on a 1-year deal. And if that's the case, is that going to draw Chris Paul to want to come to New York and play for his old agent? I don't know. And Chris Paul will be on the trade block in the offseason. Mm-hmm. You know why? Because the Thunder are going to do everything they can to try to get as much back for Chris Paul.
This is his highest value, especially with the way the team has played this year. And they could use that money, obviously, to get multiple pieces. They can get draft picks back. They already did really well with the Russell Westbrook trade, getting a lot of first-round picks back. And now they could even get maybe, I don't know if they get 2, but maybe they could get 1 and then maybe a lot of future ones as well, where that could end up helping them down the road as well. Because you're right, it's going to be a hard one to move in any other state. But the way they've played this year and the way he's played this year, this could be his best value ever.
I think when you look at Chris Paul and his ability to be a leader, he would be a great piece for the New York Knicks, but I would not pay him $41 million. And I could see somebody like this agent who has never been a GM in his whole entire career screw this one up for the New York Knicks. Bring in a 35-year-old man who is going to be making $40-something million for the next 3 years and being overpaid at the position that he plays. Now, I understand what you're saying, Speedy, but this is a salary cap era. And the New York Knicks need to keep that money available where free agents like the Greek Freak, and I'm not saying the Greek Freak's going to come to the New York Knicks. I'm not saying that. But there are going to be players in the next couple of years that are in the primes of their career where the Knicks might have an opportunity or an obligation to spend that money on those players than the player of Chris Paul's magnitude because of his age. If Chris Paul was 30 years old or 31 years old, I would make a trade.
Okay, that's fair. I also think, though, too, being it's only 2 years left, the Knicks have multiple max contract slots. They don't have to pay any of their young players max contract money anytime soon. So I think from that standpoint, you could afford to maybe make that kind of trade after the fact when you know you're not going to get anyone. Now, I wouldn't trade for him before the draft or before free agency. I would let's see how that plays out first. But if the Knicks can't land that big name guy, maybe it is worth it. Because again, I don't think the money issue is really that big of a deal for 2 years.
A team that should be looking at Chris Paul for next year is the Miami Heat. And I'm going to tell you why. This is a team that has a tremendous amount of young talent. They have Jimmy Butler in place. Jimmy Butler, who's a very good friend of Chris Paul. Mm-hmm. And Chris Paul doing what he has done this year, which has been absolutely extraordinary. You bring him over there to Miami in the Eastern Conference with Jimmy Butler and all the young talent that they have, and they're going to have a pretty decent draft pick this year. I think they have 2 first-round draft picks, if I'm not mistaken, this year.
I'm trying to remember. I'll look it up.
That's okay. You don't have to look it up. But even so, they have a first-round draft pick this year that they have the opportunity to land another good young talent. They drafted Hero at what, 15?
13 last year.
13 last year, and he's turned out to be one of the top players in last year's draft.
Kendrick Nunn, who was a second-round pick a couple years ago, he's finally emerging too.
I mean, if you look at Miami right now, Chris Paul would fit Miami right now. They have a chance to be a good, top-heavy Eastern Conference team next year, even with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving coming back next year with the Brooklyn Nets. And you know where they're going to be because, let's be honest, the Eastern Conference is absolutely horrendous.
Right.
The only team that's actually good in the Eastern Conference with talent is Milwaukee.
Right.
The other teams, are you going to bet on 76ers? No. They can't stay healthy. Embiid can't stay on the court. Ben Simmons can't hit a free throw.
They don't have depth. They don't have coaching. They have a lot of fragile players. Yeah.
Tom Thibodeau would be perfect for the Philadelphia 76ers. He really would. He preaches defense. There's something the Philadelphia 76ers do not do,
right,
is play defense. Mm-hmm. And that's crazy to say because Brown comes from Greg Popovich's tree. And Greg Popovich breeds and pleads defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just doesn't work with these players.